first things first is identify your core message and idea, right? So this is essentially a really easy way to think about this is when someone listens to you and then they go off the next day and they're talking to someone else and they can say, hey, you know, I heard this great presentation from Liz and it was about, you know, how whales can save other fish in the sea, right? Totally simple. But that snapshot, that really clear idea, that's your core message, right? That's the thing that runs through all of your content. So whether it's about being aspirational, not delusional, that might be your core message. Or whether it's about being like how science can make you look at something with new eyes, that could be your core message. And what it does is, it's kind of like a litmus test, right? It's basically like something that identifies whether you should keep content or not. So when you've got a short amount of time, like you have for this presentation, you can't talk about everything in the world. So when you want to cut down what information to keep and what to throw away, you use your core idea as this kind of test. Does what I want to include reinforce my core message? Yes, keep it. No, don't include it. And this is a really hard lesson, right? Because what ends up happening is you might write this incredible piece of content for your presentation with like these amazing slides and you may be totally in love with it, and then you test it against your core message and it doesn't work, and it means you have to put that aside, right? But this is about keeping it simple, because the clearer your core message is, the clearer the audience will know what you're talking about, and then they can go off and be like, I heard this great thing from group 3 and they told me, bam, clear sentence. You've got your core message. Now you're going to look at the stories and examples you're going to use to reinforce that message. And I already heard, because like you guys are closest, so I already heard you talking about this anyway, so you're kind of almost there. The idea is, what you want to do, right, is you need to bring your message alive for people. Like, they haven't experienced what you've experienced over the last 2 days. So the idea is, this is where you get to do a bit of storytelling. You get to actually be really creative and to explain the core message and to bring it alive with little anecdotes. They may be stories. So it may be like summarizing something that you've heard today. But it may also be some information, like a statistic or a piece of scientific data that you get to explain to the audience. The thing that you need to do is just make sure that you avoid jargon, right? So this is something that scientists are very bad for, and they're getting better, is that when you're speaking to a non-expert audience, you don't want to use lots of words and acronyms and refer to things that other people don't know about. So the way to do this is to use examples. So there's this amazing, there's a couple of amazing TEDx talks that I use normally when I'm talking about this, when they're talking about science as a way to bring it to life, right? So there's this, there's this incredible woman, and she talks about this new technology called CRISPR that allows you to edit DNA. And basically she says that, imagine, it's like for the first time having a word processor or a computer to edit DNA. It allows you to go in there, copy and paste, and edit bits of DNA. That's a really easy thing for people to understand. It may not be, exactly scientifically the right thing in terms of how it actually works. So obviously you don't go in there and like cut things and copy and paste them, but it's giving people an idea of how something might work. Another really good one is a geneticist who talks about how, he talks about the first 3D printer he ever met. And he says that the first 3D printer he ever met was his mum. Right? Because his mom takes data in the form of DNA and resources in the form of food and combines it all together and creates a human instead of a printed object. So again, all of a sudden it's starting to take these really big concepts and make them really relatable. So the idea here is to tell stories using common references, using things that we all know about to really bring it to life. The last bit is thinking about why this might be important to you, right? Why did you settle on this as your core message? What made you interested, or what made you curious, or why is it important to you? So what I'd like you to do is think about why you picked this, why it's important to you. You're going to have to get a little self-analytical in this bit, and also about how you think you can make other people feel the same passion you feel about it. How can you make other people feel curious? This is a really classic structure for presentations. It's make a point, tell a story, make a point, right? The idea being is you talk about your core message, you explain it to people, you then illustrate it with 2 to 3 stories, and then you remind them what your core message is. And in both of the bits about the core message, you have different kinds of information about why this is interesting to you, why this should be interesting to the audience. And you can decide how to split that up. You may, for example, in the first point, talk about your core message and talk about why this is might be curious for other people. And then you may, at the end bit, talk about this is my core message and this is why it's really important to me. Or you can switch that around. Or you can mix it up. This is where you get to be creative and think about flow and think about how it might sound. And then in the middle, you've got your 2 or 3 stories and examples that really reinforce those messages. Okay? So you obviously are going to have time to work on that. But I just wanted to give you a bit of inspiration on how you might start your presentation, right? Because like beginning the presentation is often one of the hardest bits for people. They have no idea like what the first thing is they're going to say. One thing I ask you not to do is start with the word so. So basically, can you hear me in the back? Am I speaking loud enough? There's no reason to undermine yourself from the word go. Okay? You're going to have a strong and amazing start, and we're going to practice it. Because actually, if you can start strong, it's basically it sets you up for success. So let's think about how you grab the audience's attention, right? So there are a couple of like easy ways to do this. You can open with a puzzle. Why is it that? Did you know that? Sometimes this really curious and weird thing happens, right? Start with something that makes your audience curious. It may be something that made you curious and that you're passing it along. Or, oh, by the way, these overlap, right? Because you can start with a puzzle that is also a question. But another way is to ask a question. Have you ever wondered why there aren't more people doing this? Have you ever wondered what holds people back? Sometimes the thing that worries me the most is this. Does it worry you? Think about the phrasing of that, right? It immediately draws people in. You can also start with a very small, quick story. Sometimes it can be something first personal. And the thing here is that you're obviously going to have more meaty stories later on. This is just to get people curious. And you can also give away the punchline. So it used to be thought that you built up suspense, like you slowly tease people to what the big reveal is going to be at the end. And you can still do that, and it's a bit more difficult. But these days, everyone's used to hearing right away what the topic is, right? When you write blog posts, you put it right at the top. When you write essays, you put it right at the top. So it's the same thing here. You can start right away with saying that I'm going to tell you a recipe for success as a woman in STEM. But I'm going to use you guys as things, sorry. You can also flip that. You could say, have you ever wondered what a recipe success would look like for women in STEM? Different, right? Or you might say, have you ever wondered why people always talk about women in STEM? Have you ever wondered why there isn't equality? You can tease it out. So the idea here is getting people's attention. And I'll leave this up for you guys in a little bit. But once you've gotten that start, you then go into your stories. And then you go into your close. And the close is make sure that you're really clear about your core message. And also with the closing, just like you started with oomph, close with it. Make sure people know it's a full stop at the end of that sentence, right? Sometimes you can say thank you, right? Sometimes you can just say something and step back or whatever it might be. But what not to do is go, I have this really important thing to say, and now I'm just going to trail off into nothingness. Or, what I saw recently, which I thought was shocking, yeah, I think that is all I have to say. Yeah, thank you. Like, you didn't know that you finished, right? It doesn't instill confidence in your audience, and that's the kind of stuff you want to avoid. Even if you don't feel it, even if you're like, oh, I don't even know if I finished, just finish. And I'm going to give you some tips about how you do that, how you make sure that you always start confidently, and you always end confidently. And in the middle, can we make it up as we go along?